bells ring. We are doing this series, many of you might remember, but it's always good. We've slept a time or two since then, looking at this year's Advent and Christmas through the lens of carols and songs of the season that we know and that we love. And we're letting them remind us of the themes, of the gifts that God had come to give, that God wants to have be the anchors of our faith. And we come to this carol that I know seems to get chosen almost every Wednesday when we have our hymn sing, a.k.a. Stump the Organist, for our Wednesday services. Before the service starts, we always sing extra Christmas carols, and someone almost always asks for this one. So I thought we let this one fit as well, and I think, frankly, the words fit a lot of where the world is today, but more importantly, where God still is today. So as we've done, just a reminder again of what we sang there a moment ago, and I put up the wrong one. Don't you mind me. I pulled up the wrong week. That's last week's message. All right, let's fix that. Let's fix that. There we go. That will help a lot. This was originally written as a poem. I'll say more about that for a minute, but why don't we read this together? It was a poem, would have been read. Let's read this first verse one more time together. I heard the bells on Christmas Day, their old familiar carols play, and wild and sweet the words repeat of peace on earth and goodwill toward men. This poem was written by Henry Wadsworth Longfellow. Got to make sure to put that middle name in there. And at the time that it was written, at this time in American history, he's probably the most famous poet America has. The poet laureate, the one who wrote the poem that I bet a lot of us memorized in elementary school, about Paul Revere and his midnight ride. All that. And yet this poem is about a different war. He wrote that poem about Paul Revere and the Revolutionary War. He wrote this poem in 1863. Now, just to get a little bit of context of what was going on in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's life, he's watching the country around him that he loves torn in half by war. Men and women killed, some of them over things that would not kill us today because we have easy things like soap and water and antibiotics. We have surgery that's done in a more skilled way than just cutting off a wounded limb as fast as possible and tying a bandage around it and hoping for the best. A terrible war doing so much terrible damage. But there was also terrible damage happening in Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's life even before that. You see, in 1861, his wife had died, and doctors could do nothing to stop it as she suffered and went on and on. Then, in 1863, his son, secretly, against Henry Wadsworth Longfellow's wishes, enrolled in the army to fight for the Northern forces in the Civil War. He'd already lost his wife, and the thought of losing his only son was more than he could possibly bear, and that's why he said, "You can't go to this war." But his son went anyway, and his son was gravely wounded. And Henry Wadsworth Longfellow took a train down to the south, I believe it was in Virginia, that he searched from hospital to hospital ward, looking until finally he found his son near death. Got him on the train somehow. I don't know how all that works. It sounds like it ought to be a movie to me. But then brought him home and nursed him back to health. It was in the midst of seeing the damage and destruction of that war firsthand, traveling by train, in the midst of seeing his son's life hanging by a thread, that Henry Wadsworth Longfellow wrote this poem. It was even darker in its original form, but when it was put to music by John Baptiste Calkin in 1872, he took out some of the darker, the horrifying images of war that were in the original poem. He took those out and left it as you and I know it today. And yet it still is quite strong and quite powerful. That in this